So thank you, big thank you for Kelly for inviting me to speak here. I might need to put something to stand on here. I feel very humbled presenting in a room full of all of the experts, clinical experts and researchers, so thank you. So my talk today is going to be less about presenting research data and more about presenting ideas for future. And hopefully to spark some interest in, I get to share my passions, so that's always a little bit of fun. Looking at using an assessment of everyday function to assess the presence and perhaps severity of hand. And the assessment I'll be talking about is the assessment of motor and process skills. Just to put into context where I'm at within my work, thinking about health conditions such as HIV, looking at the ICF, we know that this might play into everyday performance. We know that policies, procedures, and stigma might also play into activity and participation limitations. Personal factors such as age, education, sexuality might play into this, and body functions or comorbid health conditions. My interest, my passion is all around activity and participation. The assessment of motor and process skills only assesses at that level. So we're not assessing at impairments, we're not assessing body functions, body structures, those kinds of things. We're assessing how that all comes to play in performance. Within the context of this talk, we'll be looking at HIV-associated neurocognitive disorder and how this might impact performance. So some of you might be aware of, have seen this chart looking at the 3 levels of hand. And we heard Sean talk about it this morning, from asymptomatic, mild, and more moderate or dementia. And the column that I'm most interested in, and how this affects daily life. And I find it interesting that we have a category of impairment that has no impact on function. And I'm questioning whether it's more of a issue that we don't have, or we haven't utilized assessments that are sensitive enough. I will propose in this that the asymptomatic does actually, there's a potential that there's an impact on function. So the assessment of motor and process skills, it's a performance-based evaluation and it's an occupational therapy specific evaluation where we watch a person perform 2 chosen and relevant everyday tasks. And we observe the quality of performance. And how that's observed is a criterion referenced assessment where we rate 16 motor and 20 process skills. And they are rated on a scale of 1 to 4. 1 meaning there's something markedly deficient, marked delay, safety risk, they needed support, they needed assistance, all the way up to a 4 where the person was competent. And the things we're looking at are effort, efficiency, safety, and independence. And the person within the AMPS will perform 2 tasks, and all of those skill items are scored for each task. Okay. We have over 110 standardized AMPS or ADL tasks, and they range from very easy, very simple, something like brushing your teeth, putting on your shoes, all the way up to quite complex, where you might be making French toast, espresso, those kinds of things. When we administer the AMPS, we always target the task challenge to the person's abilities, which is quite a benefit when you're looking at episodic disability, because you can target it based on what's happening for that person in the given day. The AMPS can be used across the lifespan from age 3 up, person with any diagnosis, or even well healthy adults or children. Okay. We have done, Jackie Hagen and I and Anders Kotrup, a colleague from Sweden, initial evidence that the AMPS is valid for use with persons who are living with HIV. There's evidence to support that ceiling and floor effects are minimized using the AMPS, and I'll talk a little bit about that. And that the part of the minimizing ceiling effects is because we can target task challenge to the person. Okay. Now, just because I'm going to put a plug in for HIV and aging, this is a diagram showing AMPS motor and process skill measures across the lifespan for healthy individuals. Okay. So we can use the AMPS, and they are not, persons who are healthy, adults are not maxing out on the scale. And what we see is that as you age, you get more competent. If you can imagine a 3 or 4-year-old putting on shoes and socks, it's not an efficient process. And as we get older, we get more competent, and once we hit about the age of 50, start to go downhill a little bit. So I don't know where everybody is in that spectrum, but part of the natural aging process with regards to function is that as we age, we're less efficient, we're more effortful, more clumsy. We might be needing supports. Now, what about HIV across the lifespan? We really don't know how HIV impacts performance across the lifespan. And this question has come up with Patty this afternoon. Is it HIV or is it age? And with this data, of the normative data, we have the potential to answer this question. So, if we have persons living with HIV, do they follow a similar trend, like an exact trend, or are they having more difficulties within their performance? If persons are having accelerated aging, might we see a more marked decline after the age of 50? We don't know these answers yet, but I argue that we should be exploring this through a measure such as the AMPS. This is a graphic report that you get when you administer the AMPS and you put all the scores into the computer. All of the scores are entered into the computer and converted into linear measures that take into account the challenge of the task, the rater severity, and the challenge of the items. So I could test somebody in the morning when they're feeling good with harder tasks, test them in the afternoon when they've said, this is when I really go downhill, I have more fatigue. I might offer them easier tasks. And I can compare on this same scale the difference between morning and evening. Okay? The yellow bands on the side show where a healthy, well person of that client's age would fall. So you could compare your client to a normative range. The cutoffs for motor and cutoff is at 2 logits. Below that, we know that the person is experiencing some effort, perhaps safety risk, and perhaps some need for assistance. On the process scale, it's more related to efficiency. Is the person performing in an efficient manner? The study that sparked my interest in related to hand is that a group looked at persons who had had a stroke. The physician marked them off 1 month after their stroke as asymptomatic. But on the AMPS, they were still coming up below their healthy peers. And that resulted in additional intervention to get them back up. Okay? I propose a question: might persons with asymptomatic hand also fall? So if we think about how the AMPS is scored, we might have individuals who are safe and independent in most of their daily activities. But the AMPS is going to pick up those mild inefficiencies where there's disruptions in the performance. How many of you, when you're tired, you walk across the kitchen, you stop, and you think, and then you carry on? We've all done it, right? The AMPS will pick up on some of that stuff. So when we have clients that are saying, I can do it, but it's just taking longer. It's a lot more effortful. We're going to pick that up. My question would be, on this scale of ability, could we start to have regions or zones that would delineate these 3 levels of hand? I don't know yet, and hopefully some work that we might be doing with Sean will help us answer that question. So to wrap up, I think I'm doing okay, aren't I? I would propose, with this one assessment, could we use it to start as a screening tool to detect the presence of hand, to differentiate the levels, to monitor disease progression, and evaluate efficacy of treatment. The other thing, while I have just another maybe minute or so, would be that within the data that we had with the study we did with Jackie, that we had existing data in the AMPS database, and 60% of those persons who were assessed with the AMPS who were HIV positive, they were more than 3 standard deviations below their healthy peers. We hypothesized that the OT evaluation was coming in after a crisis. So I would like to use the AMPS to identify persons who are in that mild range so that we could do something proactive and to help prevent disease progression and or functional decline. Okay, fine. That was it.